66 million years ago, a cold wind swept across a desolate grey sky. The world was drowned in darkness. There was no longer day or night. We are at the moment, just after a catastrophe that nearly wiped out all life on Earth. A fireball, 10 kilometers wide, came hurtling from space and brought the mighty dinosaurs to their knees. The faint glimmers of light left in the world no longer came from the sun, but from the smouldering fires devouring everything in their path. And yet, amid this scene of death and devastation, signs of astonishing life began to emerge. The tiny creatures, once living under the reign of the dinosaurs, were now free. They hadn't been wiped out instantly, but a brutal struggle for survival awaited them. Some would adapt, some would evolve, and a few would go on to conquer forests, grasslands, and plains across the globe. Others took to the skies, mastering the air or ruling the vast oceans where Mosasaurus once roamed. But most remarkable of all, one of those survivors would one day lead Earth into a completely new era. The era of humankind. That's right, humanity would never have come to be if that catastrophe hadn't happened on that fateful day. It was violent, it was terrifying. But how did those tiny creatures, including our own ancestors, manage to survive such a cataclysmic apocalypse? That question brings us to today's main topic, the history of humankind. Episode 1, Surviving the Apocalypse. Before we begin, TAT would really appreciate your support with a like and a channel subscription right now. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our most exciting videos. And now, get ready for today's journey. One more note we'd like to share with our viewers. This series isn't just about humankind. It's deeply connected to the development, divergence, and distribution of many other species throughout the history of life on Earth. Numerous scientific theories and hypotheses have been proposed, but none have been fully accepted by the academic community or the public at large. That said, while the theory of evolution may not be universally convincing, it remains the most fitting framework we have to explore and build the content in this series. Sit down for a moment and think. How far back do you think you could trace information about your ancestors? You might easily learn about the people who gave birth to your grandparents through family stories or ancestral records. But beyond that, there's no way you could directly know anything about your distant ancestors, the ones who lived during the height of feudal societies. But what about ancestors from even further back? Many studies suggest that our ancient forebears, who lived more than 30,000 years ago, shared this planet with another species, the Neanderthals. In fact, it wasn't just coexistence. There were even individuals born from the interbreeding between us and them. And going even further back in time, our ancestors were furry, four-limbed creatures constantly on alert, wary of lurking threats like the saber-toothed tiger. And finally, around tens of millions of years ago, our ancestors were breathing the same air as these giant, fierce reptiles. But who were they? In 2012, while examining a collection of unidentified fossil bones stored in a museum, scientists noticed something unusual in the data about a small fossil, one that looked remarkably like the remains of a tiny primate. And incredibly, they found and successfully restored part of the ankle bone of Purgatorius, a strong candidate for the earliest ancestor of primates, including humans. But today, primates include a wide variety of mammals, not just us, but also our great ape relatives and other groups as well. Even though they share many common traits, identifying the very first primate species is extremely challenging. Early primates, in particular, and primitive mammals in general, were relatively small in size. Their bones weren't well preserved in Earth's fossil record, and were nearly impossible to find before modern archaeological techniques emerged. It's highly likely that thousands of mammal fossils were overlooked, or even discarded, without anyone realizing. As for the Purgatorius fossil this time, after many hours of analysis, scientists concluded that it had a very flexible ankle, a trait common among tree-dwelling animals, similar to modern monkeys. This wasn't the first time scientists had discovered Purgatorius fossils. Back in 1960, a few tiny teeth were found. Then in 1965, when research on those teeth was published, Purgatorius was declared the first primate species ever identified. It's difficult to imagine what they looked like based on just a few teeth. Take a look. Teeth this small strongly suggest that Purgatorius was about the size of a mouse. Their main sources of food were likely insects and plants. However, whether they actually lived in trees, as scientists have suggested, remains a big question. Purgatorius is older than any other primate species ever discovered, but no one really knew how old they were. It wasn't until 2021 that a study revealed Purgatorius likely lived between 105,000 and 140,000 years after the dinosaur extinction event. While we don't have any direct fossil evidence showing that Purgatorius evolved, it's very likely they lived during the final moments of the age of dinosaurs. In a dense forest where massive carnivorous dinosaurs roamed the ground, seeking survival among the treetops would have made perfect sense. Perhaps, in one such forest in North America, the story of humankind quietly began, with Purgatorius. But of course, for something to begin, something else must come to an end. This centipede is crawling along a high tree branch, unaware that Purgatorius is watching its every move. The little predator is waiting patiently for the right moment to strike. To most other animals, arthropods like this are nearly invisible, their colors blending perfectly with the dark branches. But Purgatorius had no trouble spotting its prey, thanks to its exceptionally sharp eyesight. Meanwhile, a herd of long-necked dinosaurs moves through the forest. With their massive bodies, they trample and clear away part of the vegetation in the area. Now they must continue their endless journey in search of food that can sustain their enormous bodies. The herd's heavy footsteps make the ground tremble. But Purgatorius is not afraid. It knows the dinosaurs won't harm it, as long as it stays clear of their path. After securing its prey, rich in nutrients, Purgatorius allows itself a moment of rest. It looks up, gazing intently at the sky. And that's when it happens. A strange, blinding light, growing larger by the second, streaks across the sky. It's beautiful. Mesmerized, Purgatorius can't take its eyes off it. The herd of dinosaurs below was no different. None of them realized that danger was approaching until it was far too late. A 10-kilometer-wide asteroid tore through the atmosphere, blazing like a second sky, a fiery omen streaking across the heavens. In just a short while, when it struck the surface of this planet, all would return to dust. The final result of that moment was the extinction event that wiped out the dinosaurs, marking the end of the Cretaceous period and ushering in an entirely new era. The Cretaceous was an age of astonishing biological abundance. Life had flourished on a breathtaking scale, shaped by warm temperatures, plentiful oxygen, and a favorable climate. Dense jungles and sprawling forests stretched across nearly every corner of the Earth. Prehistoric creatures weren't just strange and fascinating, they were enormous, far larger than most animals we know today. In a study published in 2021 in the journal Cretaceous Research, scientists suggested that the long-necked dinosaurs, sauropods, may have been among the largest animals to ever walk the Earth. One species, they noted, could have reached a towering height of 37.1 meters, over 120 feet. This growth may have allowed them to access higher, more breathable air layers, avoiding lower altitudes where thick carbon dioxide still lingered in heavy concentrations. But environmental factors alone may not fully explain their massive size. But this raises a timeless question. Why were they so massive? The first theory offered by scientists centers on environmental conditions. Chief among them was the concentration of oxygen in the atmosphere. Higher oxygen levels, they proposed, may have played a critical role in enabling such extraordinary growth. Prior to the height of the Cretaceous, atmospheric oxygen levels rose to between 15% and 19%, still lower than the 21% we experience today, but significantly higher than earlier epochs. It was during this time that the earliest dinosaurs began to appear in what is now the tropical regions of North America. As they adapted to their world, their bodies grew larger, evolving to thrive in an environment rich in oxygen. With such towering stature, titanosaurs could reach vast swaths of vegetation untouched by other species. They could graze more widely and with less effort, enjoying a rich buffet of plant life that their shorter contemporaries simply couldn't access. More than that, their internal anatomy was built for the task. Their massive digestive systems were designed to handle enormous quantities of food. These creatures were not picky eaters. They couldn't afford to be. Their immense guts could break down even the toughest, most fibrous plants. Researchers estimate that a titanosaur would have needed to spend as much as 22 hours each day, consuming roughly 129 kilograms, about 285 pounds, of vegetation. A large esophagus and powerful digestive tract gave them the edge needed to survive and thrive in the demanding prehistoric world. Enter the Patagotitan, a colossal titanosaur and one of the longest creatures ever discovered. Its very existence gives weight to a second theory: efficient feeding. Inspired by the modern-day giraffe, scientists proposed that these dinosaurs' long necks provided a considerable advantage over other large herbivores. In the grand design of evolution, sheer size was not merely a spectacle, it was a solution, engineered by nature for survival. Yet in the final, fateful moment, that towering size, once an evolutionary advantage, became a deadly flaw. In the aftermath of the Cretaceous apocalypse, no land-dwelling animal weighing more than 25 kilograms survived to see the new age. The mass extinction erased over 75% of all living species on Earth. The geological history of our planet is scarred by countless catastrophic impacts, each leaving behind indelible traces. One of the oldest lies in South Africa, the Vredefort crater, spanning 160 kilometers. It is believed to have formed nearly 2 billion years ago. Though much of it has eroded with time, NASA's Earth Observatory suggests that the crater was carved by an asteroid 10 to 15 kilometers wide. Far to the north, in Sudbury, Ontario, another massive scar remains. A 2014 study in Terra Nova proposed that this formation may not have been caused by a traditional asteroid, but rather by a colossal, comet-like object, a blend of ice and rock, that struck Earth approximately 1.8 billion years ago. But of all these cosmic collisions, one stands above the rest, not because of its size, but because of its consequences. For it was this impact that allowed the tiniest of creatures, including Purgatorius, one of our earliest mammalian ancestors, to survive when giants fell. The notion of a mass extinction at the end of the Cretaceous wasn't new. It had first been proposed over 200 years ago. In 1825, French naturalist Georges Cuvier observed a stark shift in fossil diversity between the early and late Cretaceous periods. Massive creatures seemed to vanish from the record, replaced by smaller animals, birds, mammals, and more modest forms of life. Clearly, something extraordinary had occurred, but for decades, no one had proof. Every theory was challenged, until a remarkable discovery gave the world a definitive answer. In the late 1970s, two geophysicists, Glenn Penfield and Antonio Camargo, were conducting aerial surveys in the Gulf of Mexico. Their mission? To locate potential drilling sites for Mexico's state-run oil company, Pemex. There, beneath the waves of the Yucatan Peninsula, they stumbled upon a massive, buried crater. They reported the finding to Pemex, but were forbidden from releasing any of the data publicly. For years, the world remained unaware of the impact site's existence. Then, in the early 1980s, another team of scientists began detecting unusually high concentrations of iridium in rock layers dating to the end of the Cretaceous. They called it the KPG boundary. Leading the effort were Nobel laureate Luis Alvarez and his son, geologist Walter Alvarez. They investigated sites from Italy to Denmark to New Zealand, and every single location told the same story. 66 million years ago, Earth was suddenly coated in a rare element, iridium. Tough, brittle, and scarce on Earth's surface, iridium is more commonly found in asteroids and meteorites. The team proposed a bold idea. This strange chemical signature came from space. In 1980, they published their findings, claiming that a massive asteroid impact had triggered the mass extinction of the dinosaurs. It became known as the Alvarez hypothesis. Glenn Penfield, reading the paper, wrote to the Alvarezes to share his discovery. But for reasons still unclear, he received no reply. It wasn't until 1990 that further analysis confirmed what Penfield had found a decade earlier: the long-lost impact crater. At last, the pieces fit together. The Alvarez hypothesis was confirmed, cementing the asteroid strike as the leading cause of the Cretaceous extinction. The crater was named Chicxulub, after a nearby town on the Yucatan Peninsula. And it was no ordinary scar. Measuring 180 kilometers in diameter, the crater gave scientists the data needed to calculate the size and force of the object that had struck Earth. The asteroid was likely traveling at 40 times the speed of sound, delivering an impact equivalent to 100 trillion tons of TNT, roughly 7 billion times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. It unleashed shockwaves that triggered towering tsunamis crashing against the shores of ancient Mexico. A magnitude 10 earthquake rippled through the planet. Fiery debris rained from the skies, but the worst was yet to come. Though the blast zone was devastating, it was the aftermath that brought extinction. The collision ejected vast quantities of rock and dust into the atmosphere. This debris soared high into the sky, where it condensed into thick, soot-dark clouds. These impact clouds spread across the globe, veiling the Earth in darkness. Gravity brought them back down, but not gently. They fell as torrential black rain, coating the world in a shroud of ash and choking the life out of ecosystems on every continent. Billions of dust particles rained down from the sky, tearing through the atmosphere with blistering speed. The friction they created ignited the air, enveloping the planet in searing heat. Entire forests erupted into flames. Earth had become an immense, inescapable oven. Everything on the surface was scorched beyond recognition, and the largest creatures were the ones who suffered the most. Their flesh was flayed by waves of superheated winds. They were battered by towering tsunamis and shaken apart by quakes that split the earth like brittle glass. But the nightmare didn't end there. The thermal storm decimated food sources and triggered acid rain that poisoned fresh water. When the heat passed, darkness fell. The skies choked with thick sun-blocking dust. Light vanished. Plants died, unable to photosynthesize in the gloom. And yet, our ancestors survived. But how? While giants gasped their final breaths, extinct within a geological blink, Purgatorius endured. Take the Haast's eagle, for example, once the apex predator of prehistoric New Zealand. These majestic, flightless bird hunters didn't vanish due to climate or competition, but because their prey, the giant flightless moa, disappeared. Before the arrival of mammals on the islands, the only native land mammals were a few species of bat. In that vacuum, the Haast's eagle reigned supreme at the top of the food chain. But everything changed in the 14th century, when the first humans arrived. They came armed with advanced tools and coordinated hunting tactics. The Haast's eagle didn't stand a chance. Within 200 years, their primary food source had been hunted to extinction, and with it, so were they. The tale of the Haast's eagle reveals a broader, brutal truth about nature. Over-reliance on a single food source is a dangerous gamble. The eagle's massive size had evolved in tandem with its prey. Without the moa, it could not survive. Short-term success is no guarantee of long-term survival, especially for highly specialized predators. In contrast, creatures capable of adaptability, of shifting diets, changing behaviors, and exploiting new resources are the ones who outlast the apocalypse. And this is precisely what saved Purgatorius in the wake of the Cretaceous cataclysm. Even before the asteroid hit, life was never easy. Competition for food and mates was fierce. But after the impact, that was a different world entirely. Suddenly, Purgatorius found itself in a realm of darkness and cold, an alien world stripped of its diversity, where former neighbors vanished overnight. the vibrant ecosystems of the Cretaceous had turned to ash. And yet, our ancestors endured by embracing what others could not. Flexibility. They weren't picky eaters. Survivors of the mass extinction shared a few crucial traits. They could dig, they could swim, they could nest. But above all, they could adapt. Small size was their secret weapon. It allowed them to hide, to scavenge, to survive on insects, fungi, or anything else they could find. Most critically, their flexible diet meant they weren't tied to any one food source. Purgatorius and its fellow survivors found shelter from the worst of the disaster by avoiding the open and seeking refuge in underground burrows or natural caves. Their years of tree dwelling had also given them the skill to build complex nests. Still, another mystery remained. If the world's forests had been obliterated, how could a tree dweller survive? Indeed, the lush canopies of the Cretaceous were gone. Ecosystems would take at least 5,000 years to stabilize. The towering hardwoods and thick jungles Purgatorius once called home had vanished. So how did it adjust? The answer lay in what rose from the ashes. Fossil evidence shows that the first plants to return after the catastrophe were ferns. Hardy and fast-growing, they spread across the ruined landscape. But even before the ferns, fungi emerged as the dominant life form. Unaffected by sunlight, fungi did not need photosynthesis. With plant life temporarily crippled, mushrooms and molds blanketed the earth. For small animals struggling to survive, this sudden explosion, it was a strange, post-apocalyptic world. A dark planet covered in spongy decay and fungal blooms. But in this unlikely refuge, Purgatorius found food, shelter, and hope. Even though these primate ancestors were adapted to tree life, they had to become behaviorally flexible, willing to descend to the ground when needed. Perhaps they evolved to act like modern squirrels, living mostly in trees, but descending to forage among the leaf litter when hunger struck. In those first weeks after the impact, some may have escaped the forest fires by hiding in crevices, caves, or burrows. When they emerged, they did so into a world changed forever. And yet, they survived. Not by strength, not by size, but by learning to eat anything, live anywhere, and bend without breaking. That is how our story, the human story, survived the end of the world. These nests provided warmth and safety as the temperatures began to fall. Moreover, developing the ability to swim, much like many modern primates, allowed them to access aquatic food sources, adding much-needed variety to their diet. In fact, there's ample evidence to suggest that freshwater ecosystems were not as severely impacted by the asteroid. Regardless of which survival strategy they used, we know it worked. Because here we are today, occupying a position in the natural world unlike anything that has come before. Though the KPG extinction wasn't the most devastating in Earth's history, it was arguably the most pivotal, reshaping the very balance of life on this planet. Today, a popular hypothesis asks, what if the asteroid had never struck? Would the reign of the giant reptiles ever have come to an end? Without the mass extinction at the end of the Cretaceous, could humans have ever evolved? To grasp the scale of this question, imagine evolution as a steady, rhythmic process, continuing through the Cretaceous, rarely rushing. But then, occasionally, it explodes. In just a few million years following such a catastrophe, evolution can take leaps. Bird-like mammals began evolving into more diverse forms than they had over the previous 160 million years. With dinosaurs gone overnight, these mammals diversified in size and shape at a rate never seen before, quickly filling the ecological gaps left behind, seizing the opportunity to rebuild a world from the ground up. A wave of new mammalian forms emerged. Paramies, an ancient rodent, armored armadillo-like creatures. Otis and Oya, some of the oldest known branches from this lineage, would eventually give rise to the manatees and elephants we know today. In the midst of the rising Rocky Mountains, fearsome wolf-like Andrewsarchus stalked through North American forests, some growing to the size of modern bears. Over time, large-bodied mammals began to dominate this new era, staking their claim on the throne once held by the dinosaurs. But what about us? 12 million years after the impact, new species of primates began to thrive. Their descendants were destined to become the future rulers of the Earth. They lived during the dawn of the Paleocene epoch, around 55 million years ago. The asteroid impact had become a distant memory, just a scar on the planet, marked by a vast crater spanning hundreds of kilometers in the Gulf of Mexico. Tropical forests now stretched far beyond their modern limits. Fossils of lush tropical plants have been found as far north as Greenland and Alaska. Earth had become a paradise for primates. They spread far and wide, leaping from branch to branch in the forests of North America, Africa, Europe, and Asia, sharing this tropical Eden with a variety of other thriving mammals. At this stage, most primates were still small, yet they were undeniably one of the most successful and rapidly diversifying mammalian groups. It would take time before the land became home to larger primates, like today's apes and baboons. By 34 million years ago, as the Paleocene gave way to the next era, mammals had grown larger, fiercer, but they were about to face their greatest challenge since their ancestors first clawed their way through the post-apocalyptic world of the ancient past. A sudden ice age arrived, forcing all life into yet another fight for survival. But this time, they were ready. Having already survived an apocalypse, most species had developed the ability to adapt quickly. From around 34 to 23 million years ago, Earth entered a transitional period where ancient climates began shifting toward the conditions we recognize today. The defining traits of earlier ages faded away, replaced by more familiar environments. In this world, one trait stood out above all others: intelligence. The intellectual advantage of our primate lineage began to shine. 17 million years ago, a group of curious primates sat on the forest floor, foraging for fallen fruits and seeds amid the leaf litter. Though they were still tree dwellers like their ancestors, their quadrupedal movement made them comfortable navigating the forest floor. They were much larger than Purgatorius, the tiny primate-like creature believed to be our earliest ancestor. Some individuals in this group even reached the size of modern female gorillas. When danger approached, a predator stalking nearby, one member gave a sharp call of alarm. The others scattered, climbing swiftly back into the canopy. It was clear. Compared to their ancient forebears, these primates were smarter. Their brains were noticeably larger than those of other animals of similar size. Perhaps it was here, at this moment, that a new type of primate truly began to emerge, setting the course for a dramatic rise in brain power and complexity. Everything was now in motion, preparing for our arrival. Another 10 million years passed. The Earth saw the rise of the ancient Dryopithecines and Proconsul, the iconic apes of their era. But in many ways, this was the true age of monkeys. Natural selection shaped their bodies and brains, giving many the tools needed to tackle increasingly complex environments and ecological challenges. And then, a primate unlike any that had come before stepped onto the scene. In just 7 short million years, a blink in Earth's long timeline, its descendants would build cities, create art and language, and establish belief systems as intricate as they were powerful. End of part 1. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe to receive my latest videos. Thank you, and see you in the next video.